Welcome to the Mastering Microsoft Office, Excel, and PowerPoint as a healthcare professional course on Thummim NG. My name is Kubiat Morgan, and I'll be your instructor for this series. First, let's look at Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel is a spreadsheet package that comes bundled with the Microsoft Office suite. The one I have open right here is the Microsoft Excel 2019 version on Mac. If you have a Windows system, or you're using an older version of Microsoft Excel, I assure you that the number of concepts that we're going to cover in this series is going to be very relatable, if not exactly the same with what you will obtain in other versions. Microsoft Excel, as a data-intensive software, helps you do a wide range of things, from keeping medical records to budgets to so many other lists and data that you might want to keep track or keep record of, and it does this in a very organized way while giving you tools to perform calculations on this data, to sort and filter this data, as well as even apply certain formulas to make managing this data very easy. For this lesson, we are going to be focusing on exploring the window, the Excel window, as well as seeing how we can make a basic data entry in Excel. Stay tuned. In order to get started with Excel, we must first, after launching the application, of course, and you can launch the application by simply clicking on the application icon, like I have mine here on my dock. Same thing you can do on a Windows system, on your taskbar or on your desktop. You can click on the application icon to launch the Microsoft Excel application. Now, once we have launched the Microsoft Office application, the first thing we're going to do to get started with Excel is to open a blank workbook. Now, alternatively, we can browse through the list of templates available to us here, but in this case, we are just going to focus on opening a blank workbook. So I'm going to double click my mouse on the blank workbook here, or I can click on the blank workbook and click on create here at the bottom right. This is going to open a new Excel workbook. Now, once this is open, one of the key things you should take note of is what the window looks like. Up at the top here, we have what we call tabs. Okay, each of these tabs open up what is called a ribbon. A ribbon contains different actions or functions that you can perform in Excel. All these actions are grouped under the ribbon. The draw ribbon has certain actions. The page layout has actions related to page layouts. Formulas, same thing. Data, review, view. At any point in time, if you ever need to perform any action, all the actions that you possibly want to perform in Excel are grouped under these tabs in ribbons. In Excel, it is important to note two very, very key concepts. The very first is a workbook. Now, a workbook is essentially the Excel file you just created. It has the extension .xlsx for the newer versions and .xls for the more older versions. A workbook consists of sheets. Now, sheets can be likened to pages in Microsoft Word when we talk about documents. You can find out what sheet name you're looking at the bottom corner, at the bottom of the window here. You can create a new sheet by clicking the plus icon beside the sheet tab. And by clicking that, I just created a new sheet. You can use this to organize your data into sheets. To switch back to the first sheet that was created, the default sheet, I simply go and click on the sheet name. What you can also do with sheets is to rename sheets. If I right click on a sheet, I can see rename, and if I click on that, I can change the name of my sheet. A sheet consists of columns and rows. A column can be identified by letters ranging from A down to Z, and where it stops at Z, it starts again, but this time using double letters, AA down to ZZ, and where it stops there again, it goes on with triple letters, and so on and so forth. Now, a row is identified by numbers, starting from number 1 down to as many as you would need. So we can see here that Excel has the capacity to handle any size of data or set of records that you may want to impute inside it. The intersection of a column and a row is what we refer to as a cell. Right now, we are looking at the cell B5. How does a cell get its name? A cell is named starting with the name of the column that it is on and the number of the row that it's on. In this case, this particular cell that we've just selected is on column B and row 5, so it is named B5. This also means that every cell in Excel has a name. Another key term to note in Excel is what we refer to as range. Ranges in Excel are just a group of cells. They can be a group of cells in a column, it can be a group of cells in a row, it can be a group of cells that cuts across both rows and columns. A range is named by calling the intersection of the top left column in that range, which in this case is D6, that is row 6, and column D, which is called D6, and you say D6 through the bottom right column, cell, which is on column F and row 16, and you call that F16. So this entire range can be called D6 through. When we want to specify through, the word through in Excel, we use colon, through D6 through F16. So this is the notation that defines this range. In the same vein, if we wanted to define this range, we would say that this is starting, the very first cell that we have here is A3, and the last cell in that range is A9, and so this range would be A3 through A9. Finally, if you had this range and you wanted to name it, you would find out the name of the first cell in that range, which in this case is D4, and you say through, which is column, the last cell in that range, which is I4, and you call this range D4 through I4. It is important that we have an idea of how ranges and cells are being named, because it would make it useful later on to be able to specify certain operations on your data. Let's get to another important part of using Excel: data entry. To enter data into an Excel worksheet, what you simply do is click on the cell that you want to enter your data into, and then simply start typing the data. In this case, I'm just going to type in name, and then I'm going to hit the enter key. Once I do that, you notice two things. First of all, you notice that the cell A1 now contains the data I just entered, name. And once I clicked enter, it automatically moved to cell A2 for prepping for the next data entry. And if I were to enter another information inside A2, say Paul, and click my enter again, it moves to the next cell below it for another data entry. Also, the data that you can enter in an Excel sheet is not limited to only names. You can enter numbers. So in this case, I will click on cell B1, and then I'll type in age and click enter, and then I'll type in 45 and I'll click enter. Now, you also notice two things. While I pressed enter, the cell that is the control around that cell moved to the next cell, prepping for the next data entry. And the text I entered here in cell B2 is formatted as a number. It is right aligned. We can continue entering data like this into our Excel sheet. Now, one thing I want you to note: if you want to enter your data but you don't want it to automatically get to the next cell below the data you're entering, but you want to enter your data side by side, that is, you want to move to the next column instead of moving to the next row, instead of just typing enter after your data entry, you can press tab on your keyboard. That is going to switch columns, and then you can continue your data entry there. So take note: tab is to switch columns, while enter is to switch rows. Tab is to switch columns to the right, enter is to switch rows downwards. If you were going to reverse the action by switching rows upward, you hold shift and enter and you switch rows upward. If you were going to switch columns, instead of switching to the right, you want to switch to the left, you hold shift and press the tab key on your keyboard, and that would shift rows to the left. Another thing you may want to do while you're entering your data would be to move your data around, either copying and pasting or cutting and pasting. In this case, I want to make space for a title for the data entry I am making. And so in order to move my data around, I will simply left click my mouse button and drag through to select the data I want to select or I want to move. In Excel, your actions are basically in pairs. You must first select before you can perform the action. In this case, I will click Ctrl C on my keyboard and I click on a cell where I want my data to start and click Ctrl V. Notice that pastes the data I just copied, starting from the cell that I was on, and then pasted the data exactly as I copied it to span the remaining columns and cells. In the same vein, if I wanted to delete everything here, I can simply click and drag to select the data I want to remove and simply hit the backspace or delete key on my keyboard. What if I don't want to delete all the data? I can simply select a particular field and either hit backspace or delete on that field, and the content of that field will be cleared, and then I can type in my new value and hit the enter key. Note that if during data entry you make a mistake, like in a case where I want to type the name Peter and I say Peter's age should be 21, and I want to go back to make changes or make corrections to the data I entered inside this cell A6. If I just select the cell and start typing, whatever I type inside there would overwrite what was there initially. That is because when you select a cell, there is a difference between being on the cell and being in the cell. The first time you select a cell, you are on the cell. To edit the contents of a cell without replacing its cell content, you have to select in the cell. And to do that, we simply double click in a cell, and we can notice that we have a blinking cursor now that can help us edit. And then we can hit enter. Also, I'm going to edit this text to say names of patients and click enter. Notice that the data we just entered now is truncated, which means the size of our column is not enough to contain the data that we just finished imputing. However, notice that it does not spill into the contents of the next column. In order to make this data visible, we can resize our column. We can do that by simply moving our cursor in between the column we wish to resize and the next column, and you notice that your cursor changes into a double-sided arrow, which means you can then click and then drag right or drag left to resize the column anyhow you want. However, there is a shortcut for that. You can simply, instead of clicking and dragging, take your cursor in between the cells you want to resize, that's the column you want to resize, and the next column, and simply double click. Double clicking on that column, on that space, would automatically resize the column to fit the longest content inside that column. So now I'm going to highlight my entire data entry, and I would use Ctrl X or Command X on a Mac if you're on a Mac, but Ctrl X on a Windows system to cut the data and then paste it, make the data to paste the data starting from A2. This is going to leave space at the top here where I can put in the title for my table. and I'm going to type in patient's record. Now we can see how resizing columns can make our data entry a lot cleaner. In the same vein, we can also resize rows. To resize a row, you simply take your cursor between the row you want to resize and the next row, and when it turns into a double-sided arrow, you simply click on it and drag depending on the direction you want it to resize. So now we've resized row 1. To make this a lot cleaner, we can remove the space, or that's the division between cells, by merging 2 cells together. And how do we do that? You click and highlight the cells that you want to merge together. Remember, every action in Excel when you're working on the sheets involves first selecting the data before applying the action that you intend to apply. So in this case, we want to merge these 2 cells together, and so I highlight cell A1 down to cell B1 by clicking and dragging through from A1 to B1, and then heading over to the home ribbon. We can see a button here called Merge and Center. We simply click that button, and what that button does is it merges our cells together, the cells that we selected, and centers the data that was in that cell. In this case, we have something that looks more like the title. Now that we know how to merge 2 cells together, let's see how we can apply some formatting to our text to make it look more presentable. First, for our title, we are going to attempt to add a couple of formatting that will make it look more appealing. If we look at the home ribbon here around this part, we can see that there are various controls to select the font family, the different font type. We can select the size of the text. In this case, we'll just pick a larger text size, or you can use the buttons here to either decrease or increase the font size in a stepwise manner. We can also bolden a text. We can toggle the italics of a text. We can underline a text. Another thing we can do here is to apply a fill color to our selected cell. In this case, I would click the little drop down arrow beside the fill color button and select a color. Then the next button beside it is font color. This sets the color of our text itself inside the cell. So I will click the little drop down icon arrow there and select white. We notice that the text color changes to white. The last thing I'm going to do is to look here at this section. We can see that there are options to vertically align our text inside the cell, and I will click here to align our text to the middle of our cell. I can come here to the header of our table and click and drag to bolden this text to make it stand out more as a header. This and many more are the things we can do on text to format text to make them look more presentable. I hope you've been able to learn a couple of things with everything that we've done for this lesson. Be on the lookout for the quiz for this lesson, and I expect to see you in our next lesson, where we are going to trash out more intermediate skills or concepts in Excel. Concepts like creating graphs, creating charts, and also data sorting. See you in the next class. Bye now.